I'm being a very lazy introducer, because Tracy knows so much more about himself than I do, that you can do a few remarks on introducing yourself. If you haven't found one of those little slips of paper with the QR code on it, do that now, so that you get the option of voting for your favorite movie and you can participate in this exercise of Final Five voting. So take it away, Tracy.
How's that, Rich? So first of all, thank you for having us here. My name is Tracy Hunter. I've got several other volunteers from Voters First Wisconsin here, including Stephen, who lives, what, 4 blocks away or something?
Very close.
This meeting is very, very close. So afterwards, we'll be sticking around if you have questions. Look for anyone that has a Voters First Wisconsin tag on, or Steve. I don't think he does. So, we actually have come here before. I know we were here in 2023 and we presented, maybe it was Rich or his wife Lena, and I think we were here in 2019 as well. So some of you may have heard about this topic before. So before we get into it, before I go into the roadmap, if I imagine myself in your seat, and our theme is We Are the Guardrails, I might scratch my head and wonder, this election reform is probably really important, but I'm really worried about democracy right now, surviving. And one of the goals I have for today is to show you that this is a way that we can be the guardrails, because it may not make a difference in 2 months, but this makes a systemic change. And imagine, if you would, if we had this in place for electing our senators and congressmen and women that we send to Washington. And there was 1 or 2 other states. So let's assume there's 5 or 6 senators that were elected under this system. And the system, as you'll see, incentivizes the politicians to represent all of their constituents, or to try to. Otherwise, they won't get reelected. So I imagine that several of the recent cabinet appointments would not have passed, right? It was razor close. If we had 3 or 4 people that were elected with this system, that alone, just to give you an example of the difference to the guardrails that could have made. So we will have a time for questions and responses at the end. If you do have questions that are relevant to what's up there, feel free to interrupt me. I may put you off if we have a slide coming up after that, or to the end, but feel free to interrupt if something is not clear. So what are we going to do today? You're going to vote. Hopefully you voted for your favorite movie. We just picked that theme because it's fun and everybody likes movies usually. I'll quickly talk about who we are at Voters First Wisconsin. Then I'm going to talk about what is Final Five voting. What's the problem that it's trying to solve? Why do we think this is such a relevant solution? What are some of the benefits for all of us if we were to put this kind of system in place in Wisconsin? Then I will show you the results of the election that we held today. You'll see how the ranked choice comes in, and then we have instant runoff with ranked choice voting technique that several of you may be familiar with. How many have heard of Final Five voting before today? So several of you. How many heard of ranked choice voting? Probably more of you. So Final Five voting makes use of ranked choice voting, but it's distinct, and I'll explain that as we go. They shouldn't be assumed to be the same thing. Sometimes that confuses people. We'll have some questions and response at the end. And then there's going to be a how you can help. And I just want to put in a plug. The way that you can help is, you'll see some of these on the way out. And there's a QR code here. We would like you to, if you're interested, you think this is a good thing, you want to be aware of what's going to happen in the next couple of years, this is a way for you to just get put on a newsletter. We'll keep you informed on the progress. And we don't use this for anything else. You can either fill it out and just leave it there, or you can again scan your QR code and it just asks you for your contact information. We won't share that with anyone other than for our own use. So who am I? Just some details about me. Somebody asked me why I'm involved in this. I retired about 3 years ago, and while I was driving, I heard an interview about Final Five voting. I think it was on NPR. And I thought that makes so much sense. And I was so frustrated, just like you all probably are, angry. And I needed to turn that energy from something that hurts me to something that hopefully benefits me and everybody else. So I said, I'm going to throw my weight behind this effort. So who is this group, Voters First Wisconsin? So we're a nonprofit. We're basically trying to create better political systems in the state and bring people together to solve problems, to make a better path forward. Just like I think all of the groups here represented probably are very similar to that. We are a grassroots organization, but as Rich Eng explained earlier, we partner with lots of other groups that are similar to us. So Democracy Found is one of the main ones. They're based in Madison here, and they talk from the grass tops, and we're at the grassroots, and we are joined at the hip with them. And then we have several other groups that we partner with as well. So again, collaboration is what's happening. We're only focused on Wisconsin. We are nonpartisan to an extreme. We have to be. We actually have representatives on our group from all across the spectrum, and it's actually a good microcosm of what our society could look like again, where people from different backgrounds all join together for the common good. We partner with groups. We have 4 initiatives that we work on: Final Five voting, money in politics, which we're really ramping up our efforts to re-engage there since the opportunity is right. Nonpartisan redistricting, which we played a role in and we will continue to, and also voter access. We're not doing too much there right now. But right now we're mostly on Final Five voting, and it's only for congressional elections. Okay, that's kind of a confusing point. It's only for how we in Wisconsin elect the senators and congressmen and women that we send to Washington. Down the road, we would like to put it in place in Wisconsin, but we're gonna take one step at a time. In order to pass this, we need our state legislature to change our laws, and they may not be excited about changing the laws that may make them lose their job. So we're gonna do it in steps. So question for you. What do you think the approval rating is for the US Congress, against Senate and the House of Representatives? Guesses? Negative?
10%.
23, 13.
I heard a low of, well, negative. High of 13. It's actually it's less than 20. And it's been holding steady. This chart goes all the way back to 76.
Wow.
So the point is, people are not very happy at all, as you know, with the Congress. No surprise. So why is their approval rating so low? It's really about a lot of things probably, but mostly they're more concerned about keeping their power base and their position than they are about a lot of these other things that we care about. And I'm gonna put some up here. We could put more. I'm sure you all could throw other things that are important to you out here. These are things that Congress could be doing more about, right? In fact, we probably can't make much progress on these unless Congress is heavily involved. Education deficit, immigration reform, climate, housing, homelessness. Big long list, but they're not really focusing on that. So another reason, so I said this. This is just a diagram showing the number of bills that the Congress has passed, going back to, looks like the early 70s again. So you see the downward trend. They're getting less and less productive, which correlates with more and more polarized, right? The drop off at the end that was a partial year, so that doesn't count.
Still bad.
So, what do you think the re-election rate is for Congress?
87%.
87? 95. And it's steady. This is going all the way back to the 60s. Shocking, isn't it?
Yes.
So how can it be possible in America where we thrive on competition that less than 20% of the people think the Congress is doing a good job, but they win re-election 95% of the time? Shouldn't competition force that to change? Most things in our country do. Can you think of an organization or a company or a club where if they were doing this bad of a job of making their constituents happy, that someone wouldn't come in a short period of time and do a better job and replace them? So how can Congress be this broken? So this is a short video. I've got a few short video clips in my presentation. Let me know if the volume needs, well, we didn't actually try the volume. Hopefully it works. Yeah.
Washington is broken. We say it all the time, but it's not true. I'm Catherine Gale, founder of the Institute for Political Innovation, and I'm here to bust some myths about American politics. First up, the myth that Washington is broken. It isn't. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is to serve our two major political parties and their surrounding companies, not the public interest. Politics isn't an institution. It's a $20 billion industry, and it's plagued by toxic levels of unhealthy competition. In every other industry, success stems from healthy competition, from creating innovative products and happy customers. But in the politics industry, success doesn't depend on quality products like good legislation that would please the customers, the voters. The truth is, there's virtually no connection between our public officials acting in the public interest and the likelihood of their getting reelected. To win, they just need you to choose them as the lesser of two evils. So do you see? Washington isn't broken at all. It's fixed. And while the politics industry thrives, the rest of America, we lose out.
So to summarize, you would think that if a politician is acting in a way that satisfies their constituency, they have a good chance of being reelected, right? And if they aren't doing the job for their people, they would not get reelected. Studies have been done, which led to this whole idea of Final Five voting, that shows that that's not true. In fact, there's almost no statistical correlation between whether or not they're pleasing their constituents and whether or not they get re-elected. This is pretty much the same we saw in those diagrams a little earlier. Why? The proposal here is that the main problem is how we do the primary elections. Mike, I think earlier was talking about primary elections. Primary elections were actually an innovation during the Progressive era that took the power away from the industrialists and kind of the backroom cigar smoking old white guys that made all the decisions, and they came up with the primary idea. However, it has been gamed, it's been taken advantage of, and it no longer really is functioning in the way that Mike suggested it could. Here's another video that explains this problem with the primary elections.
This is a snapshot of America. And there's some folks on the far left and some on the far right. But most of us are somewhere in between. Now this is our Congress. They're becoming so divided and so extreme that working together to solve problems seems impossible. Which explains why the last Congress had a ridiculously low approval rating of just 20%. But somehow, 95% of them got re-elected, which begs some big questions. The answer is because our representatives literally don't represent us. Because most of us don't elect them. Buckle up and we'll explain. Most of our voting happens in the general election, so we assume that's the election that matters. But it's not that simple. Today, 83% of congressional districts are so Democratic or so Republican that they're considered locked for one party or the other. And whichever party has a lock on the district will always have the winning candidate. So the general election is over before it even begins. That means the only election that actually matters is the one where each party picks their candidate. And that happens in the primary election. And here's the even bigger problem. Participation in primary elections is extremely low. And the voters that do participate tend to be the most partisan and the most ideologically extreme. The result is a small, often extreme minority of voters wind up deciding the vast majority of our elections. And that's how we keep getting divided and dysfunctional Congress that fails to represent we, the people. Take 2020. Despite a record turnout in the general election, only 10% of all voters cast ballots in primaries. That effectively decided 83% of our congressional seats. Just 10%. This is the problem with partisan primaries. And it's the primary problem of our politics today. They create a system where hundreds of lawmakers only have to answer to the small, extreme base that elects and re-elects them. And the rest of us, the majority of us, don't matter. And neither do the problems we care about. The solution is actually simple. Our Constitution gives every state the freedom to replace their partisan primaries with a single, non-partisan primary. This will allow all voters to have the ability to support whichever candidate they want, regardless of party. The top finishers then advance to the general election where whoever earns a majority of votes wins. Several states have already adopted nonpartisan primaries, from Alaska to California. We just need more to follow. Together, we can fix the primary problem and put voters first. We can have a Congress that actually represents us and solves the problems we care about.
So let's look at that graphically. So if this pie chart represents all of the eligible voters for Congress in the country, there's about a third that just never vote. The other 2/3, they typically vote. But of the, only 10% of those people, as the video said, vote in the primaries. Wisconsin, we're better. We should pat ourselves on the back. We're about 20. It's still a low number in my opinion. But these are the House seats if you represented them with color. So that you see some districts that are guaranteed to be won by a Democrat and seats that are guaranteed to be won by a Republican, and that small little gray group in the middle, those are the king and queen makers. That's, most elections are decided by them. And that's a very small percentage. And so that 10% of the voters is picking that 87% or whatever it is of the guaranteed seats. So which is the election that matters? It's that primary election. So to make matters a little worse, there's a lot of states that have closed primaries. And I'll talk about that more in a second because a really good question came up earlier at our table. So this is a complicated diagram, but there are some states, for those of you that have always lived in Wisconsin, where there's a closed primary and you can only vote if you're registered with that party. So you have to pick your party months ahead of time sometimes. And then you're only eligible to vote for the candidates in that party. So that drives some of that 10% number. So that's why it's so important to have an open primary or a nonpartisan primary where everybody's on the same ballot. So where did this all come from? So Catherine Gale, who was the woman that spoke in that first video, she's actually from Wisconsin. She used to be the CEO of the Gale Food Corporation, I think it was called, in Germantown over outside Milwaukee. She was curious about this problem. Why doesn't competition force Congress to start to work better? Logic would say it should. So she partnered up with Michael Porter, who was a professor of economics at Harvard Business School, and they did some analysis of this problem, and they uncovered this primary problem as being the cause for the non-correcting loop in our politics. And they also came up with two suggestions for how to solve it. Final five voting is one of them. That's what we're talking about today. So what is Final Five voting? So it's an initiative to change how we elect our Congress, not who. It's a really important point. Sometimes people think we're trying to, kind of give an advantage to one side or the other, or even give an advantage to moderates. That's not even true. It's to change how we elect people. And we want to shift the important election from the primary, where only 10% of the people vote, to the general election, where 2/3 of the people typically vote. It incentivizes the politicians to make sure that they're satisfying a broad majority of their constituency, because under this system, they will lose their next election, regardless of what the party does and where the big money comes. There's a good chance they'll lose because they can't get over 50% if they have strong negatives. And our Constitution actually directs the states to have not only the right, but really, I think, the responsibility that if the way we elect our Congress people isn't working, we're free to change it. We're free in our Constitution of the United States Constitution to change how, as a state, we do this. Important, in order to do this, we need our state legislature to change our Wisconsin laws that control how we elect our Congress people. So that's a little confusing. We have to influence our state legislatures to change how we send the people to Washington. There's a lot of states where they have ballot initiatives where citizens can initiate, if they get enough signatures, they can put a proposed law change, or we can do it constitutionally here in Wisconsin, but we can't do it legislatively. So our only option to implement this in Wisconsin is if we can get our legislature to change the laws. So that's why it's so important that we're nonpartisan. We have to bring both parties together on this for this to work. So how does it work? There's two changes. The first one, I think I'm gonna change the title here. It's really an open primary is what this means, with the distinction that the top 5 candidates move on to the general election. Today, it's only one from each party, right, including the third parties. So you get one Republican, one Democrat, usually heavily influenced by the party powers and the big money that influences them. And then, we get one, they move to the general, so we have a choice of 2, unless you want to vote for a third party, and then you got that whole wasted spoiler vote question. So the change is we have an open primary, everybody's on one ballot. We still just vote for one, just like today, but the top 5 vote getters move on. So you're probably still gonna get the Republican and Democratic candidate, although they're gonna have to be positioning themselves to be much more broadly, have more broad appeal. You're probably gonna get a second Republican and Democrat that's maybe more moderate or, kind of more interesting to the general public. You might get some third parties in there or independents. 5 people move on, and then there's the second change. This is where the ranked choice voting comes in. This is what you did if you had a chance to vote with your phone. So you basically rank those 5 candidates, your first, second, third, fourth, and 5th choice. You don't have to vote for 5. You could vote for as many or few as you want. And then when, in order to win in the general election, they have to have a majority. So they tally up the vote of all the first choice votes, and if there's a majority winner, it's over, they're done. If not, you throw out the lowest vote getter, you reallocate the votes for the people that voted for that candidate that was removed. You take their second choice, you add it to the other 4. Then you look again, do we have a majority winner? And you keep doing this until you have a majority winner. You know that the winner at least is acceptable to more than half of the population, of the voters. Must we really change both the primary and the general? It sounds a little confusing, right? We're trying to talk to people into making 2 changes at once. We really can't accomplish solving the primary problem unless we do both, because we need this top primary to let 5 people move forward. We can't just have 2, because we have to take the power away from those that today control who gets to move on. So it allows multiple candidates. It lets everybody vote. It's not just going to be a closed primary, or even in Wisconsin, you can't cross over and vote for the other party for a different office, right? It also can eliminate the threat of being primaried. This has become a big problem lately, because even if you do get primaried, you can still get in as the second choice for your party, right? If they're a good candidate and have a good message. And it shifts power from the people that control the party and the big money. It gives more of that power to the voters. We need the other half too. We need this instant runoff, ranked choice voting. Why? Ensures that the winner has a majority of support in the state. But we get more choices, right? Everybody wants more choices instead of the lesser of 2 evils. I think of it as good, better, and best versus the lesser of 2 evils. Hopefully there's at least 3 candidates that you tolerate. Eliminates that spoiler effect. So if you wanted to vote for a third party, but you know that if you vote for a Green, you're going to take votes away from the Democrat, or if you're going to vote for a Libertarian, you're going to take votes away from the Republican. It gets rid of that, because if that candidate gets eliminated, your vote still counts and your second choice bubbles to the top. And no wasted votes. Today, if your candidate loses, your ballot is wasted, and here it keeps being retained until we have a winner. So this is the last video. It also describes what I just summarized about how this final 5 voting thing works. It goes kind of fast, so hold on.
Washington is broken. Over the years, it's the only political statement Americans agree on. Worse yet, we've come to accept it as fact. Newsflash, Washington is not broken. It's doing what it's designed to do. It's polarized, it's gridlocked, it's lost. The solution to revitalizing our democracy lies in a combination of top 5 primaries and instant runoff voting. These 2 innovations will reinstate healthy competition and ensure the accountability of elected officials. This system of top 5 primaries and instant runoff voting yields several benefits. For starters, it reduces partisanship. Candidates must appeal to the majority of voters in order to be elected. Ranking candidates in order of preference gives people the opportunity to vote for their favorite candidate, without fear of helping their least favorite candidate get elected, or feeling pressure to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. It's been shown to reward candidates who run more positive campaigns rather than ones who align other candidates, because it's important to be people's second and third choices too. Here's how it works. With top 5 primaries, all candidates are listed on the same primary ballot. The top 5 vote getters, regardless of their partisan affiliations, advance to the general election. The general election is where instant runoff voting comes into play. The 5 candidates who won the primary election are listed on a general election ballot. Voters can then rate each of those 5 candidates in order of preference. The candidate who achieves the majority of votes, over 50%, is the winner. Unlike our current system where candidates can win the election without having the majority of the votes, if no one gets a majority, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Voters who selected that candidate as their first choice now have their second choice counted. This process of elimination and counting the next best candidate continues until one person achieves more than 50% of the total votes, resulting in the candidate with the broadest appeal winning the election. With top 5 primaries and instant runoff voting, every vote counts and every voice is heard.
In that example, you notice the winner had, I think, 52% and the second place finisher had 48%. That 4-point swing there isn't really the point. The point is that in order for them to have even gotten to that round, they have to have been campaigning, and if they were an incumbent, actually legislating from the middle and trying to represent the majority of their district. That's really the point. So there's a lot of benefits. There's benefits to we voters, to us. There's benefits to politicians and to parties. And we won't have time to go into this. If you have questions, we can talk about it afterwards, but it certainly would give us better governance and representation, because they won't get reelected if they're not doing that. It gives us better choices. That wasted vote problem where you're afraid to throw away a vote if you want to vote for a third-party candidate that doesn't have much chance to win. It should reduce, it's not a primary goal, but it should reduce some negative campaigning, because it's kind of hard to be negative against 4 other people. And you'll be seen as negative, and that's going to hurt you among a broad base. It should also take down the impact of money in politics. It's, again, not a primary goal, but common sense, or just kind of think it through. They would have to be distributing their money across more candidates than piling it all into their one that they think that they can control more easily. Politicians get a benefit, and more partition. Hopefully when voters see that the system works better, we'll have more people participating both in the primary and in the general. Politicians, they can focus on doing their job rather than raising money, which I think they spend half of their day on typically in Congress. They'll be free to collaborate across the line to the other party, with the other party, because today they get punished if they do that more often than not. There will be more opportunities for new candidates to get on the ballot. You don't have to be that one that's picked by your party. You might be, there's 5 there, so you've got more choices, opportunities to get on. Don't have to worry about being primary like we talked about. Even the parties get some benefits. Today in Wisconsin, we've had a lot of cases where people voted a crossover into the primary of the other to try to pick a candidate that was least likely for their party to lose to or win to, if I said that right, which isn't really very democratic, so it should help with that problem. Parties can still put their designation next to the candidates in both the primary and the general. They can still pick who they prefer. And it should soften kind of the impact of, sometimes primaries can be really brutal, suck up a lot of money and very negative, even just within one party's primary. It should soften how beat up they get in their primary so they can focus on the general appeal. So what's our progress in Wisconsin? So in the last 2 legislative cycles, we're currently in 25-26, we had bills introduced in both chambers with strong bipartisan support. If you were here earlier, you heard Rich talk about the fact that the last cycle we had 11 Republican sponsors and 11 Democratic sponsors, which seems counterintuitive, but that kind of demonstrates that they see something in it for them as well, as far as being able to do their job. We had hearings, successful hearings in both chambers. In the end, it didn't get out of the committee. That's not uncommon. We're going to have to kind of reiterate this effort a few times for us to get across the finish line. So what are we doing in this session? we are not introducing the bills this session. And it's the legislative supporters that decided to not do it. The time's not right. There's too much difficult, controversial there are too many things going on that is causing contention. It's not a good time to bring up election reform. You know, they're all burned out with the election issues for right now. And also in 2 years, the state senate should be even more balanced. So if we have a more balanced senate and assembly, there's probably, since neither party has as much control, they don't have as much to lose, right, if they would support this. The good news is, in the most recent election, none of our supporters lost a seat. So they're all still there, and they're all still supporting. And we even picked up at least 4 senators that we know of that have already made it clear that they would support this. Alaska's a really interesting case. This is the only state that has this in place already. They have Final Four, but everything else about it is identical. And they put that in place, I think this might be wrong, they put it in 2020.
No, it's 2022.
22,
They did it twice in 2022, though,
Yeah.
special election.
So they've had a very successful experience so far. They've had some pushback from people that lost the election under this system, that didn't understand how it works, that you have to have broad appeal. But most people think that it was very successful. They've gotten more done than they've had done in decades as far as the number of bills. They're the only state that has a bipartisan majority caucus. What do I mean by that? The way that it works in Congress and in the states, the party that is in control of the chamber, they have a caucus, they get together and they get to call the shots of what they're gonna work on for legislation, and it's really controlled by the party. In Alaska, they formed a bipartisan majority caucus that has that role. They're actually the ones that get together from inputs from both parties, and they decide on what they're gonna do in the state. Because of that, they're able to get a lot of progress on things that normally would have gotten stuck. So for example, in this last year, they were able to work out a budget, and they had a budget surplus, which is a challenge, right, for any state, because they're not allowed to have a negative cash flow. They actually passed laws about election reform, and that, how contentious that is right now. And they improved their retirement system. There's always debate about, more money, less money going into retirement. They accomplished all that in the last cycle, just for example. They inspired more women to run because it's easier to get in through the primary and win. And in fact, their assembly has 40 seats and 21 of them are women. So more than half now of their assembly are women. And that's the first time they've ever been able to say that. Plus the large indigenous population there, which is normally underrepresented, as you would expect. They feel a lot more a part of the process, and that people are trying to get their vote and trying to be concerned with their issues. There was an effort in November to repeal Final Four there. It was kind of a sour grapes group of people that had lost under the other system and wanted to go back to having more control. It failed. That's the good news. It didn't fail by much, but it did fail. So that was encouraging. So I want to close up here and summarize again. So why is Final Five so important, especially now that we have all these threats to democracy and we have a lot to worry about, right? Remember all these things we talked about. Final Five voting would be a stimulus that we could use to accomplish, have the Congress accomplish progress on these issues. So it's the avenue through which we can improve many things. So let's go and look at the results of the election, and then after this, we'll have a question and response time, and then also I'll talk about the cards again. I do invite you to please consider scanning this or filling out the card just to get on our mailing list, because in 2 years, when these bills come back up, we're gonna need your help. We have a tool that helps us to do this ranked choice instant runoff. Let me refresh. So I did distribute this ballot to other people just so we get a larger number of people voting, because the demo is more realistic then. So that's why we have 77 people that replied. So we're gonna look at each of the rounds. Oops, gotta go there. look at who won. Okay, so there's round one. It was very close. Shawshank Redemption was just slightly ahead of Forrest Gump.
Can you blow it up a little bit, Tracy?
Oh, yeah, I always forget how small it is. Thank you.
There you
So,
go.
again, you only participated here in the general election part of Final Fight voting. We're pretending that we had a primary election that had initially 10 in it. And when we did this at another event, we used their primary election results to narrow it down to 5. So you're only seeing half the demo here. So Shawshank Redemption is just slightly ahead of Forrest Gump. He smiles and he groans. So what do? You dismiss the lowest vote getter, which in this case is Titanic, and you reallocate their second choice votes and add it to the other ones. And interestingly, you see Shawshank Redemption didn't pick up any ground there. So this might be a case where, a certain party has strong negatives and they didn't get much support beyond the first one. But interesting, it's still pretty close to a tie, but we have a new front runner. So we dismiss Raiders of the Lost Ark and reallocate, and now they mostly got split. Shawshank Redemption is back on top though. And out of the blue, Forrest Gump won. So we got rid of Toy Story, and a large number of the people that voted for Toy Story ended up preferring Forrest Gump over Shawshank Redemption. So you can see how you needed to have broad support to win. Even if you had strong support with 20% of the population, say, of the voters, you're not gonna win if you can't get over 51. So if you have strong negatives, you're not gonna get there. The point of who won isn't the point. The point is that Forrest and Shawshank have been incentivized to make sure that they're satisfying everybody that they represent. Otherwise, they never would have made it this far. So again, it's not who won, it's how they behave once they're in office that we're trying to change. Questions? Yes?
In the event of a dead heat.
It's
The dead one.
It's statistically, so it's possible, that's why I tried to get more votes in here, because the
Yeah,
dead
right.
heat is more possible with a small number. There's something in the statute that says what to do then.
Oh.
That's true today though, too.
Fine.
You could have a dead heat today between a Republican and a candidate, so it's highly unlikely, but it's statistically possible.
You always have a predetermined method for resolving a tie.
Yeah, it'll be part of
Even today.
the statute about what to do in that case.
In the Alaska example, you talked about the bipartisan whatever that controls
Coalition.
whatever.
Yeah.
Is that tied to this process, or is it just a coincidence that they had both of those things?
It happened because of the Final Four.
Okay.
So, because when they put Final Four in place, the candidates that won were the ones that are motivated and already interested in collaboration. And the ones that lost are the ones that were just partisan.
It was something they chose to put in place. It's not a
Right.
necessary.
So it looked like this, so they looked at the makeup, Democrat, Republican primarily there, and they had enough extremists, especially on the Team Red side, that they didn't want to cooperate. And so the party, the majority leader kind of led the effort, and it's true in both houses, they both have this, and said, I'm gonna reach across the aisle. And they invited all the Democrats that are interested, would you be willing to form this coalition to help us decide what legislation we're gonna push this year? And they basically left out the ones behind on the two extremes.
And is this happening in other countries?
Final Five isn't. A lot of countries have ranked choice voting. The open primary system, has a lot of things in other places as well. But this concept, I think, of these two put together was a new invention that came out of that book to solve the problem of how we do primaries. Yes?
Has there been a lot of lobbyist, input to
For and
stop
against?
this
Or,
idea down?
um,
Or would they care? Would it matter to them?
lobbyists probably would care. Probably the people that care the most would be the party leaders of both parties. We've had pushback from the Democratic Party in some places, like we had a ballot initiative. We had 4 of them last November, and they all failed.
In other states, yeah.
In other states, sorry. And 3 of them were, 2 of them were blue states and 2 of them were red states. But in Nevada especially, we expected that to pass.
Oh,
And in the end, one of the reasons it failed was the Democratic Party didn't want to give up control. But that happened also in in Utah, in Idaho and Montana, red states.
Why Final Five and not Final Four, like
Yeah,
Alaska?
so I think they're just trying to get more than two,
Yeah,
enough more than two that we as voters like the choices, but not so many that it's hard to think about. So 5 to me sounds better than 4. In one of the examples in Alaska, they had 4 that moved on and 1 dropped out. So then they only had 3, so that's too small of a number to really accomplish the goal. Does that make sense?
Is,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Welcome back.
In a slower voice rate, I would like you to re-explain, how do you achieve those lengths of the green bars?
Oh, yes. So there were 77, I think, if I'm doing my math right, ballots cast. So this is the goal line. This is 50% right here. I should have explained that better. So this is half of the number of people that voted. So to win, you're not gonna be allowed to be a winner unless you get over half. In this case, it went down to 2. But in a lot of cases, there's a winner, majority winner after the first cycle. So it's kind of all over the map as far as.
She's asking where the green votes come from. They come from the red bar.
Oh,
When the
yes.
red bar falls out, those votes get split up to the second
Their choices.
Correct.
choice or their third choice.
Oh,
Yep.
Can you go back to round 1, Tracy, and
Voters.
explain?
Those red bar votes,
Split.
on the ballot,
Yeah.
they are looking then at the.
Second
third or
choice,
fourth.
the
Yeah,
second
so-
choice next.
So here you see that
Oh, the second choice next. But what
dismissed-
happens if you've eliminated
We
them?
dismissed
Their choice.
15 there, because that was the lowest vote getter candidate. See where it says 15 transferred? So those 15 votes, because this candidate was removed.
Can you point to it physically? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so here's, they received, this one received 5, Shawshank did, and
That
Forrest
one
Gump got
received
10.
10.
In their,
Second choice
Second
votes of the
choice.
red.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
This is
the
round
people
4, so
who
this would be
voted
like
for
the
Toy
4th choice.
Story,
Yeah,
more of
yeah,
them
so
Oh,
had
maybe
Forrest
there's-
Gump as number 2.
It could be their second or third, depending on who was
Yeah.
left in Toy Story.
you basically
Second
go
in
to
that
whatever the next choice
Right.
is of each ballot that was
Correct.
removed. Some of them, they only were still on their first
Correct.
round,
Yep.
and some of them might have been the second, third, fourth.
and then the people who do not make us third and fourth choice on their ballot, they're not counted.
Right.
Right, they're removed from the pool, but that was their choice,
And,
we would
and
encourage
that,
them.
that number of people, votes are considered,
They're
you
removed
know,
from the total,
Yeah.
To the 50.
but we keep track of those numbers, right?
yes. So I think there were 77 initially, so let's suppose that one of them didn't vote for a fourth candidate. When it got to that 4th round, if that voter was removed, now we would only have 76 votes to consider to make halfway. Because they chose, it's their choice. They chose, I refuse to vote for either one of these. So that's why we say it's better to vote for more, because even when it's down to 2, you probably still have a lesser of 2 evils choice you might wanna make there.
Yeah, that's when you choose a lesser of 2.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
We don't have time for a lesser of 2 evils. I just, there were two things. One is I saw the spike in the appreciation or.
approval rating.
Approval rating. Why was the spike
That was the
there?
Persian Gulf War, I think.
So.
And we all got
That was-
patriotic.
That was Bush after 9/11.
Oh, 9/11.
9/11.
I knew it was
George
11.
Bush after 9/11.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Typically, there's a little spike every election, every presidential election, there's a little spike.
Right, okay, second thing
Good question.
is, how does this, it's 2 parts to the second part, okay? My second question. And that is, how does this take money out of politics? Because that's really what makes it ugly, and it's lying, and the media is involved in that. Fox News is not news, sorry. And how does this, because I'm concerned about the quality of candidates, because this is not like a grocery list, well, I don't, my first candidate is this, but I'll have to, we don't want the 5th candidate. We want someone who's very qualified, that's what I say. So how do you keep money out of politics and ensure that you have integrity of, which is telling the truth, which if we all knew the truth about what's going on, we'd all be doing more than we're doing today. Amen. Your turn.
Thank you. So the question, first question was, how does this help with money in politics? And the second question was, how does this help with quality of candidate? Is that a good way to describe it? So it doesn't directly reduce the influence of money in politics. But they have, it is, and that's why our organization is actually focusing more attention this cycle on money in politics than we are in this.
Thank you.
For this cycle. But if they only have one candidate, and that candidate has the support of the party leadership, it's much easier for the big money to target and send it there. In this scenario, they would have to spread the money around more, and it's probably gonna have less influence, because they don't have guaranteed payback like they would otherwise. There's probably other reasons if you wanna add.
Yeah, just on, the money today is mostly spent on what? Positive ads or negative ads?
Negative.
Negative. So instead of attacking the single other candidate, you now have to decide if you're gonna attack 4 other candidates. That's what makes people think about, do I really wanna spend 4 times as much or dilute how much I spend? So that's the short answer on that.
Why should we put all that money in ads and who makes the money and anyway?
Yep,
it just
totally
seems
right.
like it's-
That's why we also work on a more direct play with money in politics.
They're both major issues, and this
should have
doesn't claim to solve the money in politics problem like what we talked about.
Reduce
We
it.
should have publicly funded,
Yeah, those are all good ideas. We'll get back to the voter equality too.
Okay, this is
Or-
another two-part question. It's kind of a two-part statement. I think the answer is yes.
We're done.
These numbers are all efficiently crunched, and there is only one election.
Correct. Yeah. So the question was, is this all done in a computer system that's trustworthy? And how long does it take? So if you remember back the Senate race in Georgia, we had the football player,
Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker was up against the other guy.
Steve Warnock? No.
Yes.
Reverend Warnock.
Yeah, Raphael Warnock.
So it was something like a 49.6 to 49.3, because there was some other party, independent voters or third party that took off a sliver. In their state law, in order to win a Senate race, you have to have a majority. That's not true here, but it is there. They don't have instant runoff though. So they actually waited, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. They went through 4 or 5 weeks more of $1 billion worth of negative advertising for just those 2 candidates for one race. And then they had to wait for another 4 or 5 weeks and have all that divisiveness just continue. If you had ranked choice voting, they would have calculated it that night. It takes, 4 seconds in a computer program. By the way, the computer software is fully auditable. They report the results after each cycle. Independent people can come in and recount the paper ballots. You can still use paper ballots. So from a security point of view, it shouldn't be any different than now. In fact, there's more places to audit in this system because there's more cycles. So in some ways, you could say it's even more secure. And I just want to get back to the candidate quality. I think just because people that are interested in running for office know that they have a better chance of getting through the primary, they don't have to convince their party. They just have to be 1 of 5. So you're going to get a lot more people willing to run that might be good candidates, but in today's system, they wouldn't want to put the effort into it because they don't think they win. And then also we get 5 choices in here, so hopefully we don't get, the lesser of 5 evils. I missed who's next.
How do people get on that primary vote where the 5 are taken? I mean, you said it could be any number of people.
Yeah, so it would be up to how it's written, but we have the same thing today. There are some qualifications. You have to get a number of signatures and have a certain amount of money that you've raised that you demonstrate you're a viable candidate. It would be something similar to that, and probably.
In Wisconsin, you have to meet the signature requirements to get on the ballot. That's the main hurdle.
How about over here?
Oh, I just wanted to do does the machinery have to be all retooled, or can you use the old stuff?
Great question. I was gonna bring that up before. So in Wisconsin, she's asking, do we need new software in our voting systems? And Susan, one of our colleagues in the back, she helped me find.
DS200s, they're all set up for this already.
Well, I know as of 6 months ago, we have three different types of, Dominion and then two other ones.
And they're all set up
Two of them were already set up then, and the third one was working on it. Do you know that the third one is finished?
Well, we don't use it in the city of Milwaukee, so I'm not sure about that. But
Yeah.
I know the vast majority in the city, or in the state of Wisconsin are
Right.
set up for several different types of modalities of
But,
election.
but two of the, we only use three types of systems now. I think that's controlled by the election commission or something. But two of them already have this in place, and it's been in place for a while, and the third one is adding it. So by the time it would, you know, come around to us using this, that's, you know, the software's gonna be in place, there won't be any new expense upflow that we would have to do to update the software, buy new equipment. Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how much time and effort it took the state of Alaska to train the voters?
Yeah, so the question is, how complex was it, and how long did it take for people to get comfortable with it, and did it work? The data that we've seen, they did a lot of promotional material in various ways to help people understand how this works, and they already kind of knew about it because they had to vote for it in the resolution, right? So it was not a new concept. The surveys that came out after the election, the first time they used it, a vast majority of people said it was not hard to use. I don't remember the exact number, but you know, they had like easy to use, somewhat easy, you know, middle ground, somewhat complicated, hard to use. And the bottom two, I think, were somewhere between 10 and 15%. But even in today's system here, I mean, I'm a poll worker, and I know people will get their ballots wrong today, so, you know, you're always gonna get some of that. But the vast majority of people said it wasn't complicated.
So we've only seen one example here. I'm guessing that those of you who have been working on this have looked at multiple elections that have been done with Final Five voting. Can you give us any sense of how common it is for those redistributed votes that here are shown in green? How common is it for those redistributed votes to actually determine the winner the way they did in this example?
Like it would change, like the leader after the first round?
Well,
Is
see,
it the,
you know, Forrest Gump was behind,
yeah,
and then the redistributed votes put that Forrest Gump ahead as the winner, and I'm just wondering, I'm not asking you for exact statistics, but do you have any feeling for how common that is?
I'll give my answer, and then you guys could join in if you want. So, I mean, it's only been 2 election cycles now in Alaska.
But there are other states doing it.
No other states are doing full.
Oh,
five
okay,
full.
all right.
Other states are doing ranked choice of one
I
type or
see.
another, but, in the first, instance of it in Alaska, the governor, who was endorsed by, Trump, won easily in the first round, very popular, which you would expect if they're popular, and most people there, it's more of a red state. Nancy Patola, what's her name?
Mary Patola.
Mary. So she actually, she's a Democrat in Alaska, and she, Peltola, and she won, it took 2 or 3 rounds to win, so she won a congressional seat. And I think this, I don't know how the Senate wasn't up that time around, wasn't it? Weren't there 3 major elections?
Lisa Murkowski has one also.
Lisa, yeah.
But I think Becca's question is like, out of the hundreds of house parties that we've done, how many times does the winner of the first round not win?
It could be, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just
so,
kind of.
so I'm just gonna throw out a number, Tracy. Again, this is all anecdotal. It's just our little house parties that we've done, but we've done a lot of them. I would say maybe 20% of the time,
At most.
you're gonna get a surprise win where the non-first place winner in the first round actually wins because they had broader support.
And in the real world, that kind of thing, which again isn't the goal of this, but in the real world, that would happen more often if you have a candidate that is popular but has strong negatives, and we could probably think of someone like that. You know, they probably wouldn't be able to win in a system like this, because they wouldn't get over 50%. Most of the time though, you know, it kind of goes back and forth, and probably 50% of the time, the winner after the first round ends up being the winner. But again, we're not trying to change who wins, it's incentivizing them on how to behave and represent us better. Oh, and, sorry.
Yeah, I like this process because I think it would also help with the discussion of the issues, more candidates in there, rather than having stuff just divided and framing it on one issue, they might bring out a lot further discussion. One thing though on the framing, I would look at it a little bit differently. You mentioned that 20% of the people, less 20% like Congress. you get a very different answer as if you like your representative in Congress. So that's partly why people are getting reelected so much.
Yeah.
So a little bit of framing on that.
Yeah, so, and we've heard this before too, you know, people don't like Congress, but they do often like, more often than not, like their congressperson.
It's everybody else.
But the thing that, I was thinking about that recently too, but in today's system, they have a choice of two, right? So when it's your party you prefer versus someone that is not, you're good, I like that one, you know, they may not be as excited. Imagine a case where there were 2 or 3 candidates from that person's party that made it to the general. Now they're competing for the best ideas within their own party. Okay, that would be huge. When do we ever see that? Yes?
I'm sorry. I just think that, you know, we don't hear a discussion of the issues. Not you, but when elections come up, we're not hearing a truthful discussion of the issues. So people can't make an informed choice. And that's, you know, that has to change as well. And, so.
That's what I was getting at.
And then the other thing was, what's the difference between this and ranked choice?
So ranked choice voting is just the methodology where you get to rank your candidates, and to win you need a majority, so you keep removing the lowest vote error. And it's had some success. It's used in a lot of places in various ways. Like you can use it in a primary. Some states use it in their party primary within the primary. Other states use it like at a general election level. But for example, there's some complaints because there are cases where New York City uses this, and they might have 40 or 50 candidates that you have to rank. It's like, okay, is it 47 or 46? You know, that just isn't reasonable to ask people to think about. So this narrows it down to a number that we can manage and kind of pay attention to. It's happy medium, I guess. And your first point, issues. We need more debate and conversation about the issues. Today we get a little of that in the primary, right? Because they're competing within their own party. But they don't want to make waves, right? They don't want to come out against the party leadership. So we don't see very much talk about that. But in this system, even in the primary, now you have, say 3 Democrats or 3 Republicans that are all gonna make it to the general. So they don't have to be worried about whether their party's gonna, throw them as much support as the other person. They can be free to talk about those issues more. And when you get to the general election, now you've got 5 people there. There might still be 2 blue and 2 red. And they're all gonna have to compete for the best ideas. They'll have to convince you and me that I have better ideas than this one over here. They don't have to do that today, because most people already have a preference for party, right? So people don't really make a decision in the general election. They usually already decided.
How would, many times, when things really start to heat up in an election and more ideas are thrown out, people have already voted with the early voting. How, to me, I see that sometimes as really, I don't know if that's the problem with the parties not bringing all that attention earlier.
Yeah.
But how would this affect that? Because, sometimes people vote really early.
Yeah.
Too early, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or,
I think people would be maybe less willing to vote, I'm just guessing, less willing to vote early if they're really not decided. If they have 2 candidates, they like both of them, and they know there's a debate scheduled next Monday or Tuesday, I might just wait before I vote. I'm just kind of thinking out loud of how that might roll out. Yes?
So does this get rid of the electoral college?
No, so she's asking about electoral college. So in Wisconsin, this only applies for congressional. It's because of that problem. We can't expect our legislature to change the system that might kick them out of office.
So
Likewise, in order to make it work for presidential electoral college elections, we would have to have some changes to the Constitution. Like, for example, we'd have to figure out how to get 5 candidates on the same ballot in every state. And in order, according to the Constitution, in order to win, the winner has to have a majority of the electoral college. So what if they don't get it? goes to the House of Representatives.
And they
Okay,
decide.
we don't, none of us wants that.
So
For either party.
Our time is up.
Yeah.
It's up to Tracy if he wants to take one more question, but essentially our time is up.
Yeah, but I would ask you to please do, just let us know your name, and we'll, because in 2 years, this is gonna come up, the bills will be introduced, and we have a good chance of making this happen in the next cycle, but we'll keep you informed on the progress here.
What should we do with our cards?
You can leave it on the table, and we'll bring it, and we'll make sure it gets entered in the database. Thank you.